Hey, so thank you for being here, Milan, Tokyo, in conversation. Lina, thank you so much to be with us, and I let's enter into our conversation without losing so much time. I still remember some years ago, when the first time somebody told me about you. It was Bernard Curie, who says, there's a very good emerging woman architect working in France. She's from Beirut. She's fantastic. This the voice of Bernard. And then
Yes.
you discover your work. And I remember that time you was an emerging. Now you're fully emerged, we can say. So
Thank you.
I'm
I,
happy I saw your path going up in the best
yeah,
way.
you're one of the most precious people. I remember like a few years back and talking to you and conversing about architecture. But yeah, I
Right.
remember your book. Also, you wrote like the introduction for Bernard's book, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
is a dear friend, and I know him
No,
from.
it's good to see your talent being growing through works and projects. So I'm very glad that you can reach what you deserve. So that's good, and thank you for being with us. So I would let's start from the basics, because a lot of people knows about your work, but no, not everybody. So could you simply introduce yourself through your basic elements of your growth, and which were the element, the experiences and the meetings that influence your
Yeah.
work?
Yeah. So as you know, we started with Beirut. Effectively, I am born in Beirut. I grew up in that city, and my father is from a small village, so I had this kind of relationship between the city of Beirut and the nature, somehow both contradictions together. And I also studied architecture in Beirut at the American University of Beirut, and it was really interesting because studying in Beirut, in the city that is constantly destroyed, you grow up thinking like, how can you contribute to make things better, or to heal in a way that city, or maybe bring people together. So for me, like, architecture became a way, like, maybe to have a reaction to the environment that I grew up in. And at the same time, studying at the American University of Beirut was really great, because it was about like looking at architecture through other disciplines, through biology, because I was also interested in medicine, through political sciences, through sociology, anthropology, and really like understanding that architecture is sometimes also somehow the quintessence of of a meeting point of various disciplines together, and it's really enriched by opening our eyes to those different disciplines. And during my studies, I had the chance to do an internship at Jean Nouvel's office in London, in Paris. And it was the first time really I traveled to Europe. I didn't do it when I was very young, so it was really fascinating to be discovering Paris. This kind of very different city than the one I grew up in, Beirut, and doing that internship, it went very well, and I then finished my diploma in Beirut, and they called me to work on a project when I finished the diploma in that they have in Beirut, but through the Paris office. And the idea was, come over to Paris. We would work on this project in the city center. You work for a few months, and then you go back to Beirut. We open a practice, and then you would work on this project in Beirut. So I just packed, in 1 week, and I found myself in Paris working at Jean Nouvel's office, and interacting with Jean, working on this like interesting project. But the project stopped, and then I moved to London, working on a project that Jean had with Norman Foster. And at the end, that was a really great experience again, working on a combination of very different thoughts of
Yeah.
architecture. And after 2 years and a half, almost 3 years of experience with them, I found this like competition for a museum, for Estonian National
Yeah,
Museum.
yeah. Your first work,
Yeah,
fantastic.
so that was an open competition, and I was always, very interested to look at, competitions. I was very young, 25 years old, looking at, what I can find, and then I find this amazing national museum, 40,000 square meters in Estonia. I didn't know much the country yet, but this country had lived war, it had lived Soviet occupation, it had, it had this kind of tumultuous
Yeah,
history that I know very well too. And the way they described the museum was that they wanted a place where they can manufacture constantly their identity. So it was very ethnographic, very open way of describing a national museum. So it was very interesting. And then I thought, okay, how to do this project? I was proposing to some friends, and then I found, I just met my ex-partners at that time, and colleagues working at Jean Nouvel and working at another company in London. And then I asked them, let's do this competition, and we won. And that, starting at 26,
beginning.
signing the contract, arriving to Estonia, and they look at us, oh my God, like this is even younger than the guys who won the Sens Pompidou and starting
Yes,
this.
sure, sure. You're right. You're right.
So it was a great experience, because what is really structuring a whole project that is very important for a nation, but also working with the government, putting together a team that could lead the project with us, both in Estonia and in France. And the project, because it's really of national importance, and also the budgets are quite important. It took 10 years to finish, which is a really like a normal time for such kind of projects. Like I was doing this building, and I think the Quai Branly was just finished along the same time, and also Duva Abu Dhabi, and you can see like how much architecture takes a lifetime
Yeah.
sometimes, and so that's how it started. And then afterwards, when I delivered this project, I re-established, transformed the old partnership, and then re-established my own practice
Oh,
in
practice.
2016, Lina Ghotmeh Architecture.
And then a new story started, and now we enter in this new story.
Yes.
It's very interesting because now, well, every time I listen about your story, I understand why you're using so often the word archaeology,
Yeah.
uh, which is a kind of archaeology of post-war, or archaeology
Yeah.
of, in the meantime, archaeology of the future. No, it's very interesting to see why you are so obsessed by this word. And for this issue, I let you know we decided to keep as a key title the word memory, no, which is perfect, because it's in a way today a new generation of architects is working with a changing idea of memory of the contemporary,
Yeah.
and of the archaeology of the contemporary, looking at the ruins, of the past century, which is very interesting because, I mean, in Beirut, the first building you built was in an area which is a kind of contradictory, let's say. In Estonian, you design a museum starting from an existing building of the post-war, and we are all dealing with ruins, contemporary ruins. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like the notion of archaeology, it came up also in relation to my growing up in Beirut. Every time you would build something new in Beirut, you would discover all the archaeologies of the past. And it always made me think how architecture is very much linked to earth, and it weathers away, it becomes earth again. So when I talk about archaeology, I talk about a process of thought where architecture is not about an object that is sitting in its place, but as an emergence from its place, as a way of tracing, what had happened, and of creating common thread of weaving, like the building into its environment. And it also allows the environment to be dealt with in the large sense of the word, the environment as a resource, the environment as a social construct, as a political dynamics, and really allowing architecture to be the quintessence of those formally. So it brings in complexity in the way of thinking also, and of like, let's say, today more than ever we need that, embody our complexity, and to embrace it as very present in our lives, and to try to bring it into the way we do things, because it's about diversity, it's about opening towards the world as well. And I think the question of memory is very important. I think it's also somehow linked to the fact that like in Beirut, we're always in search of identity, in search of
Yeah.
who we are, as people, but also in the world more today, we're looking for our identity as a human beings living on that planet in a way. And the question of memory brings on the like physical memory, which is in built space, but I think also it brings on the memory of our ancestors in us, how we are the continuity of the environment, of nature, of our ancestors, of DNA in general. So it gives us a depth also in the way we could perceive space, and brings into the architecture the capacity of dialogue, because once we think about architecture as like an incubator of memory or memories, we can also start sharing more with the people. Like, for example, if I'm talking about Stone Garden project in Beirut,
Yeah.
and this emerged from the build, like first the lived moments of war in Beirut, the lived moments of scarred city, bulleted, and the thinking of how can that memory of the city be re-embodied through our architecture,
Yeah.
somehow fighting amnesia, or fighting the fact that you could forget that the war had happened and you could again make it happen. So the fact of embodying that through architecture makes you aware that it had happened, and we need the time to heal, and architecture can play the role of transforming that memory into something more maybe positive in a way. And it's not about doing that on the surface, like as a
No,
as
no,
a
no.
form, but it's about bringing life really in its essence, like bringing nature as part of it, bringing the way you look from your apartment to the outside, transforming that relationship through that device of the envelope or of the architecture.
You're right, because it's not a matter of memory as a nostalgia, but as a
No,
memory as a political tool, no?
it is. But it's a political tool, and it's also a sensitive tool. It's bringing emotions and senses again, into our environment, and putting them more as central to the way we do things. Sometimes I feel like in also we repeat our same errors. When you're looking at
Sure.
how today what we're living in a lot of events around the world, like it's more than ever necessary that we think about, we revive our memories, we revive our histories, and we make a more in-depth knowledge, and even thinking about architecture as a tool of disseminating knowledge, of embodying history in a way that it talks about events, it talks about what had happened in a place, or allows new social relations to happen. And in that way, it references also other like spatial relationships in the way it's built. So, and it's also like somehow on another level, like for example, I had like many people who experience the building in Beirut, they say it feels like it has been there, there's a sense of also anchorage, and
Yeah.
that's also about deep memory of a place. And or Estonia's relationship to the airfield. You were talking about the history
Yeah.
of that place. It's this kind of runway that was a Soviet ex-military airbase, and how the building could embody the past of those planes that are just landing on that ground, and like this entrance of the museum with the cantilever becoming like that wing again of the plane. And like formally it does embody that history in a way.
But I mean, it's very interesting because if I think to some of your works, I mean, the tower in Beirut, the wooden tower in Paris, your Serpentine, the new project for the Louvre in Saudi, and other works I saw you recently, it gives me the idea that you are also working on the let's say reshaping the idea of monument, of contemporary monument, which is a difficult word, I know, but in the meantime we still need to reflect on that, because monument is a place which in a way embody a generation, embody a community, and gives a hierarchy, a sense, a physical hierarchy, a symbolic hierarchy, a urban hierarchy, and all your works has been dealing with that. I mean, shaping the idea of what does it mean to designing a new institution for a community, but also in the meantime to design something which is rooted with the soil, with the story, with the history, but in the meantime looking forward, looking in front of you. So how could you reflect on the idea of monument today? What does it mean for an architect dealing with such a difficult but necessary word?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. In my mind, when I'm thinking about a monument, it embodies for me something that is very stagnant. The very
Okay.
and I'm always thinking that how can you rethink, like how can you create when we're thinking about memorials, about monuments, is like how can they become active actually.
Right.
And maybe thinking like echoing monuments, but maybe in a more contemporary way, or the way I'm looking at the way of architecture, is thinking about reference points.
Right.
Like moments where you're referenced, and where you can create moments of silence and moments of openings within timelines. So somehow the architecture has the capacity of making you think, almost like
Absolutely.
stopping,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that's maybe what monuments had the
I,
possibility to do, as you're expressing this. Like, it's about stopping in point and reflecting, and re-becoming a reference point of gathering, of re-establishing relationship, shaking our relationship maybe differently, and allowing focus points in a way. But I'm also interested in the fact that an architecture has a presence, has this kind of aura, but has also the capacity of dissolving, of disappearing, of being there and having been there almost. Like, if we think about the last project that I realized for the manufacturer for Hermes, this is
yes.
yeah, this is an industrial building. It's just a building that is very functional, and generally they are built in metal tins, so they have to generally they're really very mundane architectures. And there I tried to re-question, what is an industrial building? How can you give it dignity again? And
Absolutely.
at that point, it becomes a moment of reflection of can we build industrial architecture differently? Can we bring in those beautiful landscapes where industrial buildings are built beauty again? Because it's really amazing nature. So how can architecture bring back beauty in those contexts, and allow that presence of, and like almost presence but also absence of
Yeah.
architecture? So
No,
this duality I'm interested
no,
in.
I like the idea that for you architecture is an open question to reality,
Yeah.
which is a way always to rethink, which apparently is not questionable. No, I mean, every typology is a cultural evidence. So when you change the cultural dimension, then you change the perspective and the way you design architecture, which is very important for the time we are living, no? Which is the time with the open question, very urgent, very important. And in a way, architecture, I fully agree, is a political tool, but in the meantime is a way to give a different answer to a change in time, no?
Mm. Yes, I mean, it gives us a different answer. It allows us also, because as architects, we're constantly, at the crossroad, we're constantly anticipating like ways of doing, and always like dealing with the urgencies, dealing with the today problems of climate change, dealing with migrations, dealing with all those issues. And sometimes really wondering how we can get more tools actually to be more active in our society and less seen as elitist tools of making. So it is a crucial question, how we can act and how we can allow for new ways of doing, and allowing also for example, the question of resource today, what kind of materials we can use, how can we bring on more geosourced materials, and somehow also allow like the industries to move towards those more sustainable materials today.
Yeah, which is the point on the other urgent argument, which is what does it mean today thinking sustainable, no? Which is, I mean, after 30 years, it's not anymore a technical matter, it's a cultural approach, is a different way to use resources and to define also a lifespan of the building, no? Which is different. I mean, it's nothing eternal, but something which is in a way following what we need in a very generous and changing way. Recently, I've been working a lot, more and more, I would say, on this idea of sustainability as a way of working on materials, no? So it's questioning materials on a different way.
Yeah, yeah, I think like sustainability is, I mean, it's more than only ecology. Sometimes I feel like,
Absolutely.
like when you're building, a building has to be worthwhile. I am always thinking about the energy that you put in designing and constructing a building and the impact it has on its environment. So when you decide a building has to be done or rising, it has to be worthwhile. That effort has to be worthwhile something at the end. So
Yeah.
the impact of a construction has to be positive. It has the responsibility to have this positive impact on its environment, in its energy consumption, in its carbon footprint, in the way it can make use of the material, in the way that it can build on knowledge also through the making of a construction. So it's about this holistic thinking. It's not just about let's build with wood and we are sustainable.
Absolutely.
It's this kind of social sustainability as well, that is part of construction, and that's something that I realized also further when we realized that brick building also for the manufacturer building, because the building became also about reviving that brick making technique that was forgotten in the area, working with artisans to build with brick again, allowing to all the materials to be sourced locally, and suddenly the whole construction became like an interactive work actually,
Yeah.
both with like building knowledge of the artisans, uh, building a technical machine that can be highly performative, and allowing a very like a beautiful and an architectural experience that brings people into working in comfort and enjoying the place. So that balance really teaches you that one can do like architecture that has a positive impact.
Yeah.
So it's low carbon, it's energy positive, it distributes its energy to the environment, and it's also an architecture that is not necessarily high tech. It's really very,
Yes.
emerging from the earth of the ground. Yeah.
No, and I'm very interested in the idea of social sustainability, which is fundamental because that's you design different project buildings for communities. I remember your Serpentine Pavilion, and I'm thinking that probably the new Osaka Pavilion you are designing for Bahrain will be another community buildings, well, the museum and other of your work. So, don't you think that today is very important to imagine generous buildings? I mean,
Yeah.
building where generosity is let's say, if in the 20th century the idea was form follow function, today I would say form follows generosity, no? Which means
Yes.
that a different capability of offering possibilities without knowing them precisely.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not necessarily about like excess, you know. Generosity is
No, no,
about,
no, no.
you know, it's really about care, you know, that notion of building with care and allowing the notion of care and of embracing people in a place, and really getting close to that intimacy of people and the generosity of bringing together, and almost forgetting sometimes that it's not about the ego of the architect. It's not
No,
about
no.
this kind of like signature architecture. It's about like how can it really reach the intimacy of persons in the place. Like the Serpentine Pavilion for me is this example of the place that is about bringing into one serene environment that almost is a like a measure of nature around it, because it changes mood according to the outside and allows people to just dwell in a place around the same table. And it did act in that way. Actually, people really used it very like as a place of the quotidian. They were
Yeah,
coming, going, writing, and they had a lot of feedbacks in that matter. And in Osaka, it's about and I realized that now actually even more when I'm here, because for me the project emerged from the research of what can Japanese people do, construct in an easy way, and how can I actually reuse all the material I'm building with, and so it can be part of the market again. And how can this reflect also on the Bahraini craft and knowledge?
yeah,
So both together brought the idea of the wood work, but also the idea of boats and travels and relationship
sure,
to the
sure.
sea that both culture have in common. And when I came here to meet the contractors, while it's a very tense environment for construction at the moment, they were really joyful. They were really happy to build this project, and they came to me like saying that we are so happy to build this project. We really like it, and we identify with it. And it's so important that the constructors, the makers, you know, the community that is building rising structures is identifying with architecture that you're making as well.
Yeah,
And in a way, because nothing is laminated, it's just like wood elements that will be put together for those expos where a lot of waste is happening. Nothing will be wasted. It will be rebuilt. The foundation is very light foundation. So it's this community feeling is not only about the use of the building. Of course, it is also how you live, how you practice the building, but it's also the process of making, of
yeah.
constructing, also of architecture. That is about this dialogue that sometimes become invisible also in in our buildscapes.
I like that. I like the fact that you are always using joyful, because I think it's a
Yeah,
we are
it's
living in such a tense world in this moment. I mean, we feel tension. We enter in a phase of the history where tension is daily, and also the worries. And so to talk about architecture, combining it with joy, I think it's very important, because probably is the best way we as an architect has to be political, no? To
yes,
generate happiness, to generate something that
happiness.
give hope,
Yes.
no? To the community.
Yes, and Luca, I think like happiness and joy are ways also, and beauty are ways to bring people together. You know, to bridge gaps and to somehow allow non-violence,
Yeah,
non-violent behaviors. Because when you're in a place where you feel respect, where you feel dignity, we as humans we're more serene. So it's about opening the like dialogues on our scale, you know,
sure.
as little we can do at least. If we can do it, that will be great.
I think it's a fantastic. Lina, thank you so much for this
Much.
always so good
Always a
conversation.
pleasure to talk to you.
And I hope looking forward to see you in Europe when you will be back.
Yeah. Me
And
too.
good luck for Osaka. When
Thank
when is going to open the expo?
That will be next year, like
Next year,
yeah,
2025. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So we see the images soon. Okay. So thank
Hopefully.
you so much, and
Thank you.
enjoy your time in Japan.
Ciao. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
un abbraccio, je t'embrasse. Ciao ciao.
Bye.